Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a drama, horror, mystery film from 2017, titled Berlin Syndrome. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Claire is an Australian woman that arrives in Berlin hoping to find some kind of life experience there which she couldn't find back home. She's self-aware enough to understand how cliched that is, but has still decided to take the leap and explore her passion on another continent. As soon as Claire arrives, she tries to make friends with the people she sees there, showing how lonely and vulnerable she is. She spends her first night in Berlin on a rooftop with a group of strangers, and as the morning comes, Claire takes photos of the city in the golden hour of dawn. The next day, Claire walks around the city, buys a few trinkets at a flea market, and continues to take pictures. She takes a rest in a bookshop, flipping through a monograph about Gustav Klimt, and when she leaves, Claire bumps into Andy. They have a nice moment together, he chats her up and she sees right through him, but they end up spending pretty much the entire day together. Claire tells him that the reason she's there is that she wants to photograph GDR architecture and make a book out of that, but Andy doesn't understand her obsession with it. He tells her that he's an English teacher at a sports college. He dives her back at the hostel that night and she tells him that she will be going to Dresden the next day, and before she exits the car, they almost kiss, but he stops and tells her goodbye. The next day, Claire seems reluctant to go to Dresden as she planned, and she looks for the bookshop where she first saw him. To little surprise, Andy is at the bookshop, where she finds him flipping through a Klimt monograph and begins talking to him. In the next sequence, they're having a beer at a local bar and talking about her photography. He's the next generation Berliner who doesn't seem too keen on the politics of East Germany, and she can't tell that he might actually have some history connected to those times that have made him that way. They talk about that until he finds a necklace with a wedding band on it. The ring was given to Claire by her mom, who told her that if she gets into trouble she could always sell it and come home. Later, the two of them are in his car because Andy's taking Claire to his apartment in an abandoned building. The place is falling apart and she immediately notices how quiet it is since no one lives there anymore. They walk inside of his apartment and she takes a look at it, noticing that the doors don't open. Andy walks up to Claire as she's staring out of the window. They begin to kiss and undress each other, then go to his bedroom and sleep together. After, Andy tells her that he wishes they would stay like that forever, where they still don't know each other. Claire says she wishes they stay there forever as well. The next day, Andy can be seen at his job, holding a lecture for high school children. He's asking the students about the required reading they had over the weekend and tells Franca to answer. She's clearly read the book, so she explains the question in detail, regardless of her broken English. Meanwhile, Claire wakes up in the apartment and dresses, but when she goes to leave, she notices that the doors are locked and she can't find a key anywhere. During her look around the apartment, she finds a locked room and some red nail polish in the bathroom, as well as a school photo of Andy. Claire is annoyed at being stuck in the apartment all day, unaware that this is just the beginning of her trouble. Andy leaves work and runs into Peter and Jana, who ask him to join them for a drink. He refuses the offer and tells them that he has to meet someone later because Peter insists. When Andy comes back home, he finds Claire making tea and telling him that she couldn't find the key to the place. She asks him if he even left one out for her, and Andy pretends that he just forgot to leave it on the table. They go out to a club that night and Claire still thinks he's a nice guy. They sleep together and the next morning he leaves a key for her on the dresser. Claire gets up when he leaves the apartment and grabs some breakfast when she notices another Klimt book in his kitchen. Inside the book, she finds a photograph of a woman with the words "mine" inscribed on her back. Naturally, that freaks Claire out, so she checks her own back for the same inscription and finds one there too. She immediately tries the key that Andy had left for her, only to find out that it doesn't work. The windows don't open either, and her only other solution is to grab her cell and charge it to call for help. Unfortunately, just as she powers the phone, she sees that Andy has taken out her SIM card. Suddenly, Claire realizes that she's not a guest in his apartment, but possibly a prisoner. She grabs one of the chairs and tries to break open one of the windows, but soon realizes that he thought of that eventuality as well, so the glass is fortified. Claire waits for Andy at the door but doesn't manage to get out, as he comes back in, making it seem like she doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't respond to her plea to open the door and only begins talking when he sees the mess from the window. Claire tries to confront him calmly, but he just tells her that if she tries to break the windows again he'll have to board them up. Andy starts making dinner like everything is normal, while she tries to reason with him. He tells her that she's the one that wanted to stay instead of going to Dresden, but Claire says that it was just something she said after they slept together and that it doesn't mean anything. After a bit, Claire loses it and tries to fight him to open the door, but the psycho manages to overtake her and tell her that no one can hear her. Andy goes on with his life the next days like nothing has happened and visits his father at one of his lectures. Being bored at the lecture makes him want to look at pictures that he's taken from Claire when his father calls him out on his opinion about East Germany. The two have dinner together and argue about little things when Andy tells him that he has met someone. His dad asks about what happened to the other one, and when Andy tells him that she went back to Canada and the new one is Australian, the dad wonders why he always picks tourist girls. Meanwhile, it can be seen that he has been restraining her on the bed wrapped in plastic, with just a towel under her. One night when he comes back to the apartment after a run, he's seen putting his keys in a locker containing all of her important documents and stuff. Andy releases Claire from the restraints and shows her what he has bought for her. He also says that he told his father about them and that he texted her mom to let her know she's okay. As Claire stands up, with piss all over her, she says that she's not good and that her mom will work out where she is because she's paid for drinks with her card. While taking a shower, she discovers blonde hair in the drain, suggesting she wasn't the first one to stay there. Later, Andy is restraining her back to the bed, taking photos of her, when she asks him not to restrain her again because she can't go anywhere anyway. Before he leaves for work, he puts the keys away in the locker and places the locker over the front door. Claire immediately starts looking through the apartment for a weapon or anything similar that she might use until she finds a screwdriver under the sofa. Meanwhile, Andy is at work, talking to Peter and Jana, when he notices that she has his mug. She apologizes and washes it up for him, then touches his hand as she gives it back, making him act all weird about it. Andy washes his arm from her touch. When he comes back to the apartment, Claire is putting the puzzle he bought for her together. She makes him sit down and help her with it when she sees the keys in his hand. The moment Andy puts one of his hands down to place a piece on the board, Claire nails him to the table with the screwdriver. She steals the keys and manages to escape the apartment. Andy takes out the screwdriver and runs after her down the stairs, catching up to her when she gets to the door. As Claire is struggling to get out, Andy slams the door in her hand and breaks her fingers. Claire passes out from the pain and he takes her back, leaving her on the floor as he takes care of his own wound. Sometime later, Andy goes to see his dad and he says that his mother called to ask about him. This is when we learn that Andy has mommy issues because she deflected and left the two of them behind. One night, Claire tells him that she misses her mom and he says that there is no point in missing something she can't have back, especially since she has him. Andy takes more photos of her and takes them into the locked room, where Claire can hear strange noises coming out. Later, while he's at work, Claire will try to pick the lock of the room, only to have the paper clip break inside, which he will surely notice. Simultaneously, Andy is at work, holding a gym class when he notices one of the students, Franca, exercising. He has a creepy moment looking at her and the girl notices he's watching her too. One night, while he's closing the locker after taking out the scissors from it, the passage of time can be seen on his wounded hand. It has already been a long time since Claire was imprisoned there. Andy uses the scissors to cut Claire's nails and takes the bandage off her wounded hand. He tells her that he would never hurt her in the worst way she can imagine because they are a team. Moments later, he's washing her in the shower as Franca arrives at the apartment complex and can come in because the Coleman has opened the door. When she knocks on the door, Andy grabs Claire's mouth and tells her that he'll kill Franca if she screams. He comes out to talk to the girl who has a crush on her and Claire appears behind him. Andy tells Franca that Claire is his girlfriend and belittles her for feeling any interest in him. He sends the confused girl, who noticed him looking at her, away and tells Claire her name. He turns her around and cuts her hair too, then takes a picture of her again. When he notices that he can't open the room with ease, Claire gets scared that he might do something. Andy comes back to the apartment on another night and brings Claire a gift of underwear, which she has no choice but to model for him, so after a few moments of pretending she begins behaving as she'll fight him. The dude is disappointed so he asks her if she can't just ask normal, to which Claire poignantly replies that he's abnormal. Andy beats her up and as Claire gets dressed, she finds nail clippings under the bed. Since he got mad at her, Andy goes to sleep at his dad's house. Meanwhile, there is a power shortage at the apartment. Claire gets cold fast because it's already winter and snow has begun to fall. The next morning, Andy tries to wake his dad when he realizes that he has died. He cleans up his house and looks for some toenail clippers. When he finds them, he cuts his dad's toenails off while Claire is simultaneously painting her own nails and trying to stay warm. Since the gas stove is still working, she's able to feed herself while she's imprisoned in the apartment without her jailer. Andy stays at his dad's with his dead body for a few days, fixing him up in his house, leaving Claire alone to wonder not when she'll be able to escape but when he'll come back. She keeps finding trinkets left over from the others before her. After Andy finishes and arranges everything at his dad's, he comes back to the apartment. Claire is shocked to see him because she thought he would never come back. He tells her that his father died, and she tries to comfort him. They sleep together. As Christmas and New Year approach, the two of them seem to get along and play house. Andy even buys her some books as a present with the inscription that to him she is perfect. That prompts Claire to ask him how he chose her, and he tells her that he simply saw her pausing on the street looking at something. Then she asks how he chose the other girl before her, and when he lies that there was none, she tells him that she knows that's not true. Claire asks if he still thinks about her and he says that he doesn't. They have a conversation in which she tells him some childhood story, but he seems uninterested. Later, he gives her his dad's dog as a present. One day, he takes her out for a stroll in the woods and she isn't trying to escape because he's also carrying an axe with him. After a little while, he gets ready to kill her, when a boy suddenly yells after them. He calls over for their help because his brother is hurt, so Andy goes to check on him. Claire approaches the boy who called them over and starts telling him to get her help because she's in trouble. Unfortunately, the boy doesn't understand English and gets mad at her for grabbing at him. Suddenly, their mom shows up and calls the kids back as Andy grabs the axe again. He makes Claire come back to him and then takes her back to the car, putting her in the trunk. Later, when he sees how much love Claire has for the dog, Andy takes it away from her and lets it go, telling her it escaped. On New Year's Eve, Andy goes to Peter's and Jana's party. He freaks out a little when he sees how many people are there. Meanwhile, Claire finally opens the door of the locked room. There, she finds his photo album with all the pictures he took from her. Claire realizes that the weird noises he heard came from a reclining massage chair. Next to it, she finds another photo album with photos from his childhood. At the end of that album, she sees the photos from the girl he had locked in there before her. Suddenly, Claire hears fireworks outside because the new year has arrived. Andy isn't having much fun at the party, so he goes to wash the dishes in the kitchen, where he has a weird exchange with Jana. He asks her why she throws herself at him and other men, and Jana asks him to leave because she's offended and frightened. As Andy leaves the party, he sees another tourist girl outside and tries to chat her up too. She laughs at him for making a small mistake in the wording of his question, then her friend calls her over because their taxi has arrived. He drives home looking at other women, probably looking for a new victim. At the same time, Claire notices someone in the apartment opposite the one she's in and manages to draw their attention. The man quickly walks over to the apartment, but as he's trying to open the door, Andy comes back and hits him over the head. When the man is down, he hits him again to kill him. He makes Claire help him clean up and pack up the body in some plastic. Moments later, he takes the body out and stuffs it in a garbage can, pouring gasoline over it and lighting it on fire. Claire sees the fire from the apartment. In the next sequence, Andy is boarding up the windows in the apartment so she doesn't do something like that again and finishes cleaning up the place. Later, Andy is reading the local paper when he sees an article about Claire missing, so he tells her to pack all of her things up because he will be getting the apartment fumigated. Before she packs up, she sees him grating Franca's paper. She burns her hand to divert his attention, and when he goes to the bathroom to get some kind of burn cream, Claire hides the notebook under the sink. Later, he takes the papers he's grating as well as all her stuff and leaves her there. Then goes to the basement and turns off all the water in the apartment. The next day, he returns the graded notebooks to his students, including Franca. When she opens hers, she finds a photo of Claire that she managed to sneak in the previous night. The girl realizes what that means and asks to go to the bathroom, taking it with her. Unfortunately, the photo falls from her notebook and some of the other students find it. When Franca realizes that she dropped the photo, she takes her bike and goes to his apartment. Back in the classroom, the kids pass the photo around, and when it finally gets to Andy, he freaks out and drives back home as fast as he can. Andy arrives at the apartment complex and sees Franca's bike there, as well as an open window. When he enters the yard, he sees that the girls have found a way to open the box, and he quickly runs upstairs to check if Claire is still there. Andy doesn't find either of them in the apartment, but when he hears something upstairs he follows the sounds, ready to strike. As soon as he enters the apartment on the next floor over, Claire calls him back down. Andy looks for her inside, but she hides from him, waiting for him to go in deeper inside of the apartment. At one point, while he's in his special room, she calls out to him, just so he can see her locking him inside the apartment. Claire has taken all of her documents from the box and leaves him locked inside. She goes to the other apartment to get Franca, helps her get out of a cupboard where she hid, and comforts her for not realizing it sooner. The final image of the film is of Claire driving around Berlin and feeling the wind on her skin. She was probably trapped in that apartment for a year and now she's finally free. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.